All right. This is lesson number 11, Study the Biblical Flood. We're in chapter 5 of my book, and we'll spend more than 1 week, maybe 3 weeks on this chapter. We're going to be looking at some effects of a universal flood. Of course, our position is that the flood was universal. We've already laid out in Genesis 6, 7, and 13 and 17, and the passages on the screen, that God intended the destruction of every living thing that breathed air on the land, and except those in the ark, of course. So that's what we see here, destruction. There would be extensive effects on the face of the earth itself. Tremendous amount of erosion due to water. Water can erode the soil, but very quickly, right? The first effect would be destruction of all land plants, animals, land animals, and mankind that weren't in the ark. In Genesis 7:21 to 23. Now, this passage here, last week, in the last class, we noted 3 things about those who were destroyed in the flood. They were the ones who were bringing violence upon the earth. They had the breath of life in them, and also they were on the land. So there's 3 things. And he says, all flesh died that moved upon the earth. So he now used another expression. They moved upon the earth. Both birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and even every man. So here are the things that are upon the earth, not in the waters. All in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. Now again, this is a little bit different wording. So again, what we see here now, we see in their nostrils the breath of life. So that implies, in my thinking, the animals and man with lungs, of all that were on the dry land. Again, he's ruling out anything in the ocean. So Noah didn't have to take anything in the ocean onto the ark. Questions or comments? If you have a question or comment, be sure and ask it. Right. In 2 Peter 3:5, for this they willfully forget. We looked at this last week. That the heavens from of old and an earth compacted out of water and amidst water by the word of God, that is, God decreed it, by which means the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. So again, the antediluvian world perished by being overflowed with water. The word world here is not referring to the planet itself, but it's the system of things. And so that system perished, and including the way the system worked. This implies, in my judgment, that there's going to be a change in how things work after the flood. Things are going to be different. And we're going to lay out a number of things that changed during the flood. Okay. Now, at the end of the flood, or near the end of the flood, in Genesis 8:11, the dove brought back an olive leaf. Now, most people think the dove brought back an olive branch, but the Bible nowhere says that. Neither the King James nor the American Standard Version say that. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. So the first time he sent the dove out, and the dove came back because it couldn't find dry ground to land on. Now, I've been told, but I can't verify it, that a dove won't light on real muddy soil. But I've been told that. But I've watched doves. I've never seen them light on muddy soil. But that doesn't mean they don't. And if it's true, that would explain why. The dove is a strong flyer, but it can't soar around. So it has strong wings, but it can't soar. So after a while, it's going to get tired. So it has to have a place to go back to. So the first time it came back, but the second time it comes back with an olive leaf in its mouth. And in her mouth, an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. So it brought back an olive leaf. I think olive branches can sprout from the soil, and that is, if they're just stuck in the ground, they'll sprout. I've been told that. Anyone know for a fact that that's true? I've read that in books, but everything in books is not true, but that's what I read. All right, so the leaf is plucked off and brought back to Noah. So now he knows. Now, the first he sent out a raven, or actually it's a soaring bird. And the translations is raven, but it could easily have just some big bird that soars, is a large bird. Could be an eagle, or it could be another bird. But the translators translated it raven. If it's a bird like a buzzard or one of those birds that eats carrion, then it could have landed on an animal that's floating in the water, a dead animal, and been eating on it. So that's a possibility. Okay, but it didn't come back. Okay, but the dove did. Any comments? But there are some birds like the albatross that can fly for days on end, and so the albatross can. It has tremendously strong wings that can just keep flying. It can fly for weeks on end. The absence of vegetated cover, vegetation like plants, trees, and grass tends to keep the water from eroding the soil, and it also causes it to soak into the ground better. So when the water falls on slopes, when we lose all the vegetation, we're going to get a tremendous amount of erosion from the rainfall and from the water. When water falls on slopes which are covered with thick grass or numerous trees, much of it sinks into the ground and we get a small runoff. Even the dead matter under trees, like the pine needles and leaves that are lying under a tree, they almost act like a sponge and soak it up and let the water go slowly into the soil. And that's the Ordway tells us this, okay? And this is the case. I know when my grandfather came to Oklahoma in 1897 and settled, he said the grass was about 6 foot tall in the western prairies. And the rain would just fall on that grass and it would just soak right in the ground. The streams all ran. But now they farmed it and the grass is very short, or it's farmland, and the streams aren't running anymore. Things have changed because it runs off instead of soaks in the ground. All right. Rapid erosion would occur, and that would greatly increase the sedimentation. Sediment would go into the streams, and so this sedimentation would occur because of the loss of vegetation. There would, of course, be sedimentation, tremendous amount of sedimentation due to the flood itself. There would be sedimentation even after the flood because of not being covered with cover crops. Uniformitarian geologists use the present rate of sedimentation in a postdictive, that is, they project it backwards in a postdictive manner. They extrapolate it backwards in time with linear extrapolation. That's what they do. And of course, they make the assumption of uniformitarian principles. Everything is gone as it had been going in the past and no changes. And so they rule out any catastrophes, catastrophic events. And so they project it backwards. And they get incorrect values for the age of the earth. In other words, they say it takes a certain amount of time to put an inch of sediment. And so they use that to figure out how old the earth is. That's one of their ways of figuring it out. But they rule out the possibility of a flood. Right. Now, after the flood, the land is going to be repopulated by plants and animals. Well, the plants, if the seeds floated around, they can spring up in the ground and come out. But the erosion, there's going to be wind erosion until the plants grow and begin to cover it. when the wind blows. And that will be wind erosion. There'll be evidence of wind erosion. We're going to see that at the end of the flood. And there is evidence that wind erosion occurred in a number of places on Earth, even during the flood, and that will show why that would happen later. Wind erosion would add dust to the atmosphere, which could affect the climate. Large amounts of dust will block the sun right out and change the climate, at least temporarily until it settles down. So that's a factor too. Right? The Earth had to be repopulated after the flood. Therefore, the ark was used to preserve the animals in Genesis 7:23. And every living thing was destroyed that was on the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping things and birds of the heavens, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only was left, and they that were with him in the ark. And they that were with him is not necessarily just the people, it's reference to all the living creatures, including the people. Questions or comments? Now, what we see is how we're going to get animals to North and South America and Australia, places like that. Well, we're going to lay it out how this could happen. And I really believe that the method here very well explains it. If the Bering Strait, that's between Alaska and Russia, was once a land bridge, and nearly all your scientists think that, and we'll give us two sides here. Some of the animals could have traversed that bridge to live in the Western Hemisphere. We could have some to do that, right? Scientists call this land bridge Beringia. And so, and that would be the Bering Strait. And probably that's from a Greek word for the land, and Bering and land. Here's a picture of this Alaska here, and there's Russia. This is the Bering Strait across here. It's about 50 miles across. And this shows the depths of the waters. This is the waters. There's a channel through here and a channel through here, and this is not very deep right in here. There's an island here. And so this shows the depths of the waters. That's a picture from space. Right. Now here is a nautical map of the Bering Strait. And so right here, we have the depths of the ocean there. Not very deep right in here. There's that island. But right in here, it shows the depths of these. And these are pretty shallow. This ocean right in here is pretty shallow. Right? This is Seward Peninsula, Alaska, and this is Russia over here. Right? Questions or comments? Here is Beringia. This is a map made by atheists, and I think they're probably right on this. And my flood model explains why this would be covered. Here's Siberia. Here's the Arctic Circle up here. And in certain time in the winter, north of the Arctic Circle, you get 24 hours of darkness. Right? In the summer, in certain days, you can get 24 hours of sunlight north of it due to the tilt of the Earth on its axis. But here's the claim, and these are years. They put this back 18,000 years ago. I don't agree with their years, but what they do is this shows the land migration of the land route. Here's your Bering Sea. I'm convinced that this was true. This is exactly what happened. And I'll explain that with my flood model, how that works out. And so this was land, or this was an ice. It was covered with ice. I think the land itself was exposed. The oceans were much shallower than they are now, right after the flood. And we'll show why as we develop this. So the land animals then walked across here, through here. All right, any questions? This is their theory, but I think they're right. All right. Now here's another one showing the land here. The sea level was lower at this time. And we have here, across here, there's Alaska and Canada and Siberia, okay? And of course, there's the Arctic Circle, okay? So now here's the sea level was right here. This was all land. It was, the water was out here. There was your Bering Sea down here, and here's the Arctic Ocean up here, Gulf of Alaska. Right. I'm claiming that that's probably true. Now, I'll tell you why I know it's true. I'll give it, and we'll come back to it later. They found archaeological evidence of people that were living on this land. And there's some as deep as 300 feet down underneath the water now. And they found places where people were living, living sites where they lived, all along here. And they found it on the coast, all along all the continents. Okay, and so that tells me that man were living here. This would have been after the flood. So the flood model has to take care of this, and mine does. And it also takes care of this foolishness of global warming. Global warming's been happening since the flood ended, okay? Any questions? Now then, Beringia is over here, and the migration came across through here. And there was ice sheets, 2 ice sheets here. We'll come back to them later. There was a gap between the ice sheets. And these gaps would allow the animals to traverse here and have grazing, and they could come down. They'd move all the way down to South America down here. Here's, of course, Greenland. And there's Greenland, there's Iceland over here, okay? And Newfoundland up here. All right, any questions? That would also give the migration of men after Tower of Babel. So the animals first went, and then men came after them after the Tower of Babel. God probably allowed them to congregate and stay there for a while, let the animals be out there and populate. And the animals then grew and spread. And when they did, then man had something they could eat, and as they moved across. Here's the Laurentide ice sheet over here, the Cordilleran ice sheet glacier over here. And then there's a gap between them down in here. And I believe this is where the animals come down. And of course, this is their dating of these so-called people. And they got them back to maybe 10,000 years back, okay? And here's your Channel Islands, all right? And they say they think some people went by boat across to South America, across to New Zealand, Australia and New Zealand, right? But they also think at this time, Borneo and Indonesia were joined to Australia. At least Borneo was. That's their claim. We'll get a map showing that a little bit later. These are just sites that they dug out and excavated. Archaeologists have. All right. Now here's something that's very interesting. The water above the equator, north of the equator, rotates in this direction. That is, in a clockwise direction if you're looking down at it and looking like it's the face of a clock. The water south of the equator rotates in a counterclockwise direction in the ocean. A toilet, I'll use a toilet spins in this direction. They actually tilt and make the water spray out and make it spin in this direction to aid it, to take it out to the bottom of the toilet. And a toilet in the southern hemisphere rotates the other direction. An American toilet won't work in Australia, okay, in case you didn't know that. All right, they spin the other direction. All right, so right here we have currents in the ocean, and right here we have, this is called the Gulf Stream, and the red is a warm current. It goes up and warms up here, and then it comes back down and it's cooling off here. So this is a colder current, a cool current. They actually, here in some of these islands, there's islands on the west side of England. I've been to England, and there's islands that they planted palm trees on. And the Gulf Stream keeps them warm so that it never freezes there. And so they actually have palm trees growing here on some islands on the west coast of England. But look how far north England is. Right here's the latitudes, right? And right here, Spain is about as far north as New York City. But look where England is. It's as far north as Hudson's Bay. It's pretty far north, but it stays warm due to this Gulf Stream. And over here in the Pacific, it rotates this way. Of course, there's your equator rotating clockwise. This is called the Japanese current. It's a warm current. But the cool current, the cold water, comes out of the Bering Strait, out of the Arctic Ocean, and that's cold water right here, coming across the west coast of North America. All right. Again, we have down here, and this rotating counter in this direction right here, rotating counterclockwise here. Are there questions? So that's the way they spin, right? So there are currents in the ocean, and they do affect the climate, and that what this warm current makes the west coast of Europe warmer, so people can live there. But of course, over here, the cooler current tends to cool things off up in here. Okay. Any questions? Here's the continental shelves. And what we have is, in some places out here, it's only a couple of 100 feet down to the ocean bottom. It goes out several miles from the coast. And it drops off pretty good out here a little bit further. So these blue here is pretty shallow, fairly shallow. And so that's what we have here. That's just your continental shelves. We'll come back to those later, the continental shelves, but they're important for us as we are looking at the flood model. All right. How in the world could we repopulate the earth? I want to show you something that's happened in historical time. It's been documented. In 1883, there was 3 small islands between Java and Sumatra in the summer of 1883. One of the islands, Krakatau, and this is spelled different ways, and it's the variant spelling, so this subscript gives you the variant spelling of it. It blew up, a volcano. On the islands of Panjing and Surtsey, and on the remnant of Krakatau itself, now called Krakatau, they've renamed it. The effects were devastating. All 3 islands were completely sterilized, according to this site here. Now, what we have is Krakatau. Let me do here, I hit the wrong thing. Krakatau is spelled Krakatau, here's the variant spelling. And to sterilize it means that all living organisms were killed due to the volcanic eruption. The heat killed all animals and plants. So all of them were killed. Now, what happened? These islands are separated out from other land by several miles. It didn't take very long before these islands, birds, of course, landed on them. And it wasn't very long before plants were growing on them. Now, here's the thing about birds. You take a wading bird like a crane or something like that, it walks in the water, and it may pick up seeds of plants that grow in the water, and then it will defecate, and some of those seeds then will come out and they'll grow in the next pond that they land in. And of course, the birds could carry seeds in their feces and out to this island. And so plants got there pretty quickly because birds could transport them. And of course, some actually blew in the wind. Spiders have been known to go out hundreds of miles out in the ocean. They'll have a web that they send out, and they can almost like a parachute. And then the wind just carries them out and for miles and miles, hundreds of miles sometimes. And they've found them on ships 300 or 400 miles offshore that the spider can land. And so things are very resilient. They can get out there. This happened the island before 1883, and now here's what we have afterwards. just blew the island up completely. And so these right here, and now it's been repopulated. And that's since 1883. And that's not that many years. We're looking at less than 150 years, and it's totally repopulated. And it's several miles away from other islands. Waters discusses the repopulation of these islands by both plants and animals during the last century, since the volcanic eruption, showing a number of pictures of these islands. So I have sites there that I cited and links. Now here's an interesting situation. Here's another one that they have made a scientific research out of it. On the southwest corner of Iceland. Now Iceland is a volcanic island. And so there was, in November 1963, there was an island popped up out of the ocean floor. Volcanic ash was coming up. There's two kinds of volcanoes. There's those that just spew out lava and they don't explode, and there's those that explode. And there's two different basaltic and feltic lava. We'll come to those later. So this kind of lava just flows out like Kilauea in Hawaii. It just pours lava out and it doesn't really blow up. Like Mount St. Helens is a different kind of volcano, it blows up. So right here now, what we have here, this lava was spewing out in November 63, and it topped the surface of the water, began to form an island. And so Matthews and Thoresen, I cite them in the book, and Hansen, Thoresen is he's probably from Iceland, and Hansen may be as well, and has been populated by a number of both plants and animals now. This is very interesting. The Icelandic government forbade any planting of any plants on the island and putting any animals on it. They forbade it. They wanted to see what would happen, how quick it would become populated. And so they would send people in, and they made certain there wasn't any seed on their plants or shoes or anything. Make sure that they wouldn't get any in there. And so they'd come in just a few times to examine it. And very interesting, it has populated itself with both plants and animals. Now here's where it is. It's the island of Surtsey. Here's Iceland, it's right here. It's several miles offshore. So it became a laboratory and how an island would be colonized by organisms. And this has been documented. So this happened in 1963, and in about 15 or 20 years, it was populated pretty good. Right? Of course, birds will fly in very quickly, and so birds come in, and they defecated, and plants began to grow pretty quickly. But some other animals got in there, some rodents and other stuff. How they got in, they don't know, because they were very careful about their boats. Okay? But they got there somehow. Okay. All right, here's Surtsey, and this is the height of it in meters here. So it's about 54 meters at its highest point. And a meter is it's about 3.2 feet. A meter is. So multiply it by about 3.2, and 150 times 3 is 450. So it's nearly 500 feet high at this highest point. Surtsey is. And the area of it, you can get the area. This is in kilometers here. So it's about a little over 1 kilometer wide here, maybe 1.5 kilometers this way. So a kilometer is about 0.6 of a mile. So it's roughly nearly a mile from here to here, and about 3/4 of a mile across here. That's the island. Are there questions about it? But it has been populated. That's very interesting reading. But they've documented all this. They forbid anybody, and patrol boats go out there and make sure nobody goes to the island. But birds fly in. All right, yeah. And it's been populated by plants and animals both. Now here's the atheistic ideas about how human life began. And they say, of course, it came out of Africa, and then there was flowing out of Africa, there were people coming out. Now they have the Neanderthal, and they call them Neanderthal because they're from the valley of Neander, over here in the Valley of Neanders, where they found some fossils. And so here's their view. We have Homo erectus. They got erect, and they had been apes, and now they stand erect, give them that name. And then we have the modern man today, Homo sapiens. And then we have Homo Heidelberg. This is out of the Heidelberg, the city of Heidelberg, out near the city of Heidelberg, Germany. Kinesis, and that's Genesis, the beginning. And so Heidelberg man, and then we have Neanderthals and another group that they've come up with recently that they've discovered by using DNA. They found another group, and they've begun to look at them very carefully. So, but you hear about Neanderthals a lot. You haven't probably heard about these. We're going to talk about them in just a minute. So they claim that they went up here and settled in, and then the Neanderthals went over here, and this other group, Denisovan, that they also were here. They found the Denisovans supposedly in Palestine as well. Okay, and they claim that they went over to here, and they wound up clear over here into Java. Now watch here. This is the sea levels after the flood. What we have here is, if we look at this, the sea levels, here's Korea, and the Korea, for a while there, this was land right in here. And it joined Japan. Japan was joined to Korea. And the Philippines were also joined down in here to what is now, this is Indochina down here. The countries of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam primarily, okay, and Thailand, okay. So the people, according to them, moved across here, and there's close islands here, so people could go across on ships. And at this time, supposedly, Java, this is Borneo, was joined to Australia, and also Australia was joined to the little island to the south of Australia that's part of Australia, Tasmania. Okay. Any questions so far? And I believe this is true. I believe this was the case. And I think the evidence is clear. Again, they found archaeological sites. It's called underwater archaeology. It's a new branch of archaeology, just pretty recent, pretty new stuff. And this island, I think this is Ceylon, was joined to India at this time. There's no evidence that this island here was joined to Africa, though, at that time. Now, the atheist says we've had cycles of ice ages and back and forth, and I don't believe so. I think they're wrong on that. And so we're going to look at these people here in just a minute and see how they fit in. All right. Now, here's the supposed range of the Neanderthals. All right. And the Neanderthals supposedly are found in here in the Neander Valley up here in Germany, and in this region of Europe, that is. And they also find them right over here, and they think they've got them over here and here. Well, this would fit fairly well at the Tower of Babel. They spread out. I'm going to give you an explanation of what I think the Neanderthals are. Of course, when you look at the sea levels, England was joined to France during this time. Okay, so Neanderthals here. That's supposedly where they lived. All right. If you do a DNA test, almost all of us are going to have Neanderthal DNA in our DNA. I did a DNA test, and they told me how much Neanderthal I am. All right, supposedly. This is is a supposed relation of modern humans that became extinct. These are relatives, see. And we have this new group, the Denisovans. And there's supposed to be another relative. Now, Neanderthals became extinct, supposedly, and the Denisovans also became extinct, according to their theory. Okay? But they're also, we've split off after we evolved. That's the view. They first found fossils in Siberia, and this is the Denisovans, and later in Tibet. And then they found them in Palestine. Okay? Very interesting. and they linked them together with their DNA. So that's a pretty good linkage. The DNA is pretty solid, and they appear to have been quite tall. According to this, these people were very tall. Okay, they were not. They were big people, large people. Certainly, if you know the Bible, you know that there were giants in Canaan in the time of the conquest, when the children of Israel came in. But when you read more carefully, you'll find that there were giants before the flood. And also, if you read even more carefully, you'll find that the children of Lot, that is Moab and Ammon, the Moabites specifically, they took the land of a group of giants, and God gave it to them. And you can find this, and I'll give you the links for it just in a few minutes. Okay, but this is in the book of Numbers. Okay, here's supposedly the Heidelberg man, and this is what they claim he looked like. And I want to show you what they've done. And they are slick, and all it is a fairy tale. It's just fairy tale. Because here's what they have. The dirty little secret about Homo Heidelbergensis is that the whole fossil consisted of a mandible. Now, a mandible is your lower jawbone, okay? That's all they had, and they constructed this picture from that one jawbone, okay? Now, you tell me how accurate you can be with that, okay? Now, you might use DNA in knowing what people look like from their DNA, but they constructed this long before they used DNA. But this is what it supposedly looked like, all right? That's a dirty little secret. They constructed the whole specimen from a mandible. The reconstruction was more imagination or assumption than fact. That's what it was, their assumption. From a mandible, they constructed a skull. Then they added a body to the skull, just from a lower jawbone. Then they added other features to it. And this is based more on assumptions than on actual data. So you got to keep this in mind. Now, what two things are very interesting to kids? Cavemen. Okay, we're talking cavemen here. And what else? Dinosaurs, both of them. And they suck these young children in with both of these. They suck them into their atheism. Here's the skull from Heidelberg man, and lo and behold, they constructed it all from that mandible. All of this other is just fairy tale. That's what it looked like. Just fairy tale. Any questions? It's possible the Heidelberg man had acromegaly. Acromegaly is an overactive pituitary gland. This could have been more prominent when people lived several hundred years following the flood. Now, after the flood, there were men living to be 300 or 400 years old. After the flood, Shem lived 600 years. He was 600 when he died. And probably Ham and Japheth also lived a similar lifespans. And we don't know, but they probably did. Most likely they did. And so our Fakad, the son of Shem, I think he lived 525. That's a long time. And here's what happens. If your pituitary gland, if you get a blow to the head, a good blow to the head, your pituitary gland can start functioning again. And what will happen to you is it will cause your bones and other organs to grow. And if your bones keep growing, you might get something like this on up here as your bones tend to grow around your eye sockets. And that can happen. But it's not really a disease, it's due to an injury. There is also something else that can cause this. And so we have here acromegaly that can be caused also by a small tumor right next to the pituitary gland, a benign tumor. And people have them, and they get this condition. And what happens is their bones grow, and they will get the features that look like these so-called cavemen, the men that we've been talking about. And so what we get here is this could easily have happened if people lived to be 300 or 400 years old. They might have developed tumors, and to cause their pituitary gland to begin functioning again, putting out growth hormones. Right? It's also possible that the Heidelberg man would have a genetic variation of Noah's in Noah's descendants. Now, then, what I'm saying is these characteristics could be perfectly normal, nothing wrong. They could be characteristics from the variation of Noah's 3 sons and his daughters-in-law. Because God put in man, Adam and Eve, all the genetic variations we see. The genes of Adam and Eve had the genetic variation for all the skin colors, all the eye colors, and the heights and the body shapes, body forms, nose shapes, and all of that. All of those were put there by God for a purpose. And I'm convinced that they were there for survival purposes. And so the early people, the earlier you were, the more variation you had in your genes. Now, later we developed and we got specialized. As we separated out, we lost diversity in our genetics. Diversity always goes downhill. We get less and less diverse with genes and the total gene pool, because as some genetic variations die out, they're lost. The only thing that can add genetics variations is mutations. We'll come to that just a little bit later. So I think these right here could have been people who were just variations, genetic variations in Noah's descendants. Not even nothing wrong with them. And so we have 2 possibilities. Could be this problem here. And I think most likely it's just the second one. That's just a variation in people's body shapes. Any questions? I think the last one is most likely the likely cause, the likely explanation. All right. Von Engel and Castor, and this is a geology book. Now, this book is cited 3 or 4 times in the bibliographies of several different chapters in my volume. So those of you that have my book, you can find this site. It's a geology book. Another outstanding discovery is that of human teeth in China and Java of such size as to suggest a period of gigantism in human evolution. If the teeth can be accepted as indicative, these giant men stood 9 to 10 feet tall and weighed perhaps 600 to 700 pounds. I think I read about a guy about that size in the Bible. His name was Goliath. Did anyone read that? Any of you ever read about a man named Goliath? I bet you did. Possibly the heroic features of Heidelberg man. Now, then they use the word heroic to mean he's big. That's another word for large. Are indicative of relationship with these Asiatic giants. Now, think about this. This is in China, and we're in Java. I want to back up several slides and let you see something about this. You see it. Go back. This man here, that's supposed to be big. These people right here, what I'm talking about, that's these people here, the green ones. Now, that's Java. And that's these people here, and they're supposed to be real big people. Supposed to be quite large. So keep that in mind. All right. All right. Now here is giant people. There are people today living in Africa, this very time we're alive, that we're talking right now. There are 3 basic tribes, and they're basically all from the same, they speak the same basic language, Nilotic tribes. They speak a Nilotic language. The Maasai, the Turkana, Samburu, and Dinka. That's 4 tribes. I said 3. In Africa, they're quite tall. The average height of these men is around 6 foot tall, average height. Now, average height of an American man is about 5'9" in the United States, approximately, somewhere thereabouts. So they're a good 2 inches taller, maybe 3 inches taller on average than people in the United States. Now, here's the trick on this that we need to remember. These people don't eat good diets. And if they had a good diet like we have in the United States, these fellows might have an average height of 6'3" or 4". They are tall people. They're a whole race of tall people, the whole race of them. It's in the genes. It was in Noah's genes to have tall offspring. And we know there were tall offspring that were in the land of Canaan. The Bible talks about it. All right. And I just gave you the side here from Von Engel and Castor, 9 and 10 foot tall. That's how tall Goliath was. 6 cubits and a span. He was about 9'9". Now, let me show you the argument. This is the fallacious argument of the atheist. If Neanderthals were a branch of humans, then the DNA of Neanderthals would be different than modern humans. Well, that would be true if they're branched off. Okay. DNA of Neanderthals is different than modern humans. Well, that's true. But what you're doing is affirming the consequent. What doesn't prove anything. It's a logical fallacy. See? So the fact that their DNA is different proves nothing. Okay, why? Because we can get different DNA between Chinese people and people from Africa. Their DNA is different. And so that doesn't prove anything. The Neanderthals could just be a different variation of humans. And they could have all come out of Noah and his 3 sons and his 3 daughters-in-law and his wife. Any questions or comments? But this argument proves nothing. It's fallacious. Now, the only thing that adds variations to DNA is mutations. And variability in DNA is always lost with time. If you don't have mutations to add it, and they don't have any to add, what they add, mutations are always detrimental. But variation in DNA is always lost with time. As time goes on, you lose some of your variations. They're lost. You start out with the maximum variability, and then it goes downhill from there. It decreases. As an example, I cite the narrow range of DNA for the cheetah. The cheetah has a very narrow range of DNA. If some disease that needs DNA to be able to resist that disease hits the cheetah populations, they could wipe them out. We could lose the cheetahs. Cheetahs could be gone. Their DNA is so narrow, such a narrow range of DNA for the cheetah. Now, there is an Asiatic cheetah in Iran, eastern Iran, and also, I think, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? But the African cheetah there's more of them than there are Asiatic cheetahs. So they could capture some of the Asiatic cheetahs and breed them with the cheetahs from Africa, maybe introduce and put some more variation back in them, okay? Mutations are always detrimental to the organism. Now, they will tell you that they're, and if you look on the internet for mutations that are helpful, that help survival, they'll cite about 4 or 5 things. One of the things they cite is the sickle cell. Well, but the sickle cell does help to resist malaria. It does help you resist malaria if you have it. And virtually everyone who has sickle cell is from Africa. It's strictly a mutation that occurred in Africa after Noah's 3 sons separated out, spread. Mostly, Africa is settled mostly by Ham's descendants. At least the black portion of Africa is, to a large extent. And so this sickle cell causes resistance, gives you ability to resist malaria. So that's good. But the backside of it is, if you get both sickle cell from your parents, you have sickle cell anemia, and it's almost on a death sentence. So the mutation does help a little bit with malaria. Doesn't stop it, but it helps a little bit. But it doesn't, in the long run, it's very detrimental. So that mutation is not beneficial in the long run. It's detrimental. Mutations are always detrimental. Every mutation. Whenever you get, I went to a site on this, and they cited 4 or 5 things. When you read them, they admit that every single one of them is detrimental in the long run. And if you read it, everything they say, you can draw that conclusion. Plants and animals were killed in the flood. Keep that in mind. And large amounts of organic debris was buried in the sediment. That's true. And so what we do is we're going to lose some fertility to the soil. We'll come back to that later. Extensive erosion occurred, and canyons like Grand Canyon and other places like that were cut. I think Grand Canyon was cut after the flood, but I'll get back to that later. The earth was repopulated with land animals and men from the ark. The plants were given time to grow, and they grew and provided food for the plant-eating animals. And then they spread out after the flood. Okay. Now, about Noah's sons and daughters-in-law had a wide range of DNA. All right. Nothing except the mutations are added to DNA. Therefore, all organisms lose variations in their DNA with time. The DNA of humans is not as diverse as it was in Genesis 9. Now, I'm going to go back to one other thing, and we'll come back to it in just a minute. I want you to see one thing here. These people right here, when we look at them, it's supposed relative of modern humans that became extinct. They found them in Siberia, Denisovans, and Tibet, and then in Palestine. They appear to have been quite tall. From all we can tell, they were tall people, sometimes close to 10 foot tall. And they were giants in Canaan. Now, I think here's what I think could have happened very easily. We see it happening in the Bible. These people that were very, very tall become arrogant. I'm bigger than you, and I can just overpower you. And what they did is they were very brutal with smaller people. And the smaller people would gang up on them and kill them. And so they had war. You take 8 or 10 small men, he could kill one big man. But they could kill him like with a slingshot and a stone, or a spear, or a javelin, or something like that. And if enough of them hit him, they'll kill him. And so your giants probably had to fight, and they lost. We know they did lose. They lost the children of Israel, and they lost to the Moabites. We see that as well. And so once they lost, they had all kinds of problems once they lost it. All right? And so they lost their land. Now, if these people then became, because people were afraid of them, they attacked them, they could have fled away and fled to other places to escape the smaller people. And here in Tibet, what they found is their DNA is such that it enables them to live in high altitudes without getting out of breath. And so their DNA is such that they can do that. The Sherpas up there can climb up in high in the mountains without having trouble. Whereas you and I can't do that because the Sherpas have DNA that enables them to live at high altitudes. But we can't do that at these high altitudes, but they can, the Sherpas can. And so they think these Sherpas had some of the DNA of these people. And that's what they think. And so my thinking is that they might have fled to get away from the small people. Now then, that's the theory I've got. And that they were the giants and that were killed out because of warfare between the smaller people and the big people. And the big people brought it on themselves by their brutalness. All right. Any questions? All right. All right. Okay. we're going to call a halt to it, to class. And if there are no questions, all right.